Your brain edits reality to keep you safe. Sometimes it skips scenes, blows up threats, or mutes feelings, all without asking permission. When the mind can't handle reality, you do things like replay one conversation on loop, check the door 3 times, or drift through a room like a ghost watching someone else's life. Stick around, and you'll learn how to spot those edits, why your brain takes them in plain, no jargon language, and 3 simple, actually doable moves to feel more grounded right now. No blame, no labels, just quick tools and a tiny attention trick you can try between email breaks. By the end, you'll be better at seeing what's real, what your mind is protecting you from, and how to bring yourself back without wrestling your own head. 1. The complexity of the world. Cities, markets, weather, laws, friendships, and software all tangle together and push on each other in ways that are hard to predict. A single storm can slow deliveries, which then empty store shelves, which then change consumer choices, and a tweet can make all of that look urgent. Systems talk to one another without asking. That means small changes can ripple into big surprises. It is a fact that many everyday outcomes come from interactions, not from one clear cause. Our brains try to keep up by simplifying. First, to use quick rules and mental shortcuts to decide fast, because my working memory only holds a few things at once. That helps when choosing what to eat or which route to drive, but can also lead me to miss bigger connections. For example, seeing one bad news headline about a product makes me avoid it, even if the problem is limited to one batch. My shortcut turns a local issue into a general fear. Technology and networks make complexity louder and faster. A navigation app can reroute millions of drivers at once, shifting traffic flow into neighborhoods that never expected it. Health advice comes from doctors, influencers, friends, and comment sections, and those voices often disagree. First, you get pulled by each new headline and struggle to decide which voice to trust. Companies change suppliers to save costs, and suddenly a tiny factory delay affects stores across the country, showing how tightly linked choices are. Practical moves help when everything feels like too much. First, you break big problems into bite-sized parts and test one small change at a time, which shows what matters without overloading the mind. First, do limit incoming information by choosing a few trusted sources and turning off the rest, because less noisy input makes patterns clearer. Simple experiments, asking clear questions, and admitting uncertainty are useful habits. They do not fix complexity, but they let me act without pretending first understand everything. 2. Why the intellect strays. The mind looks for patterns because patterns save energy. When reality scatters, the intellect fills gaps with quick guesses. First, do this when a single headline paints the whole story for me, and first stop looking for nuance. Confirmation bias is a plain fact. First, do notice evidence that fits what first already think and skim past the rest, like a selective scanner that only reads the parts it likes. For example, first do remember that one negative comment at a meeting and ignore the 5 compliments that came before, because the loudness of a single worry drowns out quieter data. Emotions pull the intellect off its rails, and stress amplifies that pull. First, do react faster and think less when first am tired, scared, or rushed. Planning becomes awkward and snap judgments feel useful. When first am anxious about a phone call, first do replay the worst possible outcome, and that loop feels rational, even though it's just a habit. Short-term comfort often wins. First, do choose simple, vivid explanations over careful, complicated ones because they soothe me immediately. The modern information environment nudges me away from careful thinking. 2. First, do scroll through curated feeds and compare my messy life to polished snapshots, which twist my judgments without my permission. Sensational headlines get more attention. So first, do click and then believe, because vivid stories are more memorable than dry facts. Echo chambers matter. First, do tend to hang out where my views are echoed back, and that repetition makes any idea feel truer, even if it lacks balance. Self-protection and mental shortcuts keep the intellect wandering. First, do rationalize to avoid discomfort. First, do label inconvenient truths as exceptions or blame ambiguity on bad luck. Avoidance looks practical from the inside. So first do distract myself with urgent, easy tasks rather than sitting with hard questions. Humor helps here. My brain is a sketchy roommate who hides uncomfortable facts in a drawer labeled later. Exposing these tendencies without blame lets me see that the intellect strays for reasons that made sense at the time: safety, speed, social fit, and that noticing what first do is the first step toward more careful thought. 3. Theory is a refuge. People often reach for tidy explanations when life feels messy, because tidy ideas give the brain something it can hold on to. First, do notice that when first am overwhelmed, first label a jumble of feelings with a neat theory. First am just anxious, or that's human nature, and suddenly the chaos looks like a chart. A neat idea promises predictability and a script for what to do next, which is comforting when choices feel messy and risky. The shelter that theory provides works like a warm, but sometimes smothering, blanket. It helps me sort facts into categories, predict people's behavior, and talk confidently in a meeting or at a dinner. For example, someone who reads about leadership frameworks might start using phrases like, "We need alignment," instead of making a tough call, because the framework feels safer than stepping into conflict. Or a person grieving might describe their pain entirely with philosophical concepts and miss the actual sensations in their chest. In simple terms, using theory as refuge means hiding in ideas so you don't have to feel uncertainty, discomfort, or make hard choices. There are real costs to hiding there. Action stalls. Relationships get turned into case studies. Learning slows because theories aren't tested against messy reality. Think of a manager who always applies a business model instead of asking employees directly what they need. Small problems turn into bigger ones. Or the friend who explains every disagreement by citing a personality label and then never tries a different way of relating. Those are concrete examples of how sheltering in thought can create distance rather than solve the original problem. Practical checks help keep thinking useful and honest. First, do quick real-world experiments. If first believe a plan will work, first try a small step and watch what happens. If a theory seems to explain why someone behaved badly, first ask one clarifying question instead of declaring the whole relationship defined by that label. Simple practices include testing predictions in one-week trials, asking 2 other people for their observations, and using sensory checks. What did first actually hear, see, or feel? These are low-tech ways to compare theory with actual events. Keep the maps separate from the territory. A theory should guide, not replace direct experience. Treat ideas like tools on a belt rather than furniture in a house. When thinking feels like hiding, set limits. Give yourself a 15-minute theory session and then move to action. Humor helps. Call it the lab coat test and put on the coat for analysis, then take it off to get things done. First, do allow theories to inform choices, but first don't let them become an excuse to avoid the messy, imperfect work of living. 4. A break with action. The brain sometimes cuts the power to movement when everything feels too loud or too sharp, and that sudden pause can look like doing nothing. First, you stop talking mid-sentence and stare at my hands. People freeze, withdraw, put things off, or drift into a kind of mental buffering that keeps them from acting even when acting would help. A blank face, slow speech, or avoiding a phone call are all common signs. It helps to know these reactions are normal protective tricks, not personal failures. Sensation often leads the show. Breathing gets shallow, vision narrows, thoughts loop, and muscles go heavy or tense. First, do notice my chest tighten and my mind hand off the decision to a smaller, quieter part that just wants to hide. In a meeting, someone might suddenly stop responding to questions. On the street, a person who nearly collides with a bike may sit on a bench and stare rather than call for help. These moments feel like the brain is lowering the volume to avoid overload. And the result is that action. Any action slows or stops. Small, practical moves can restart the engine. First, I name what first am feeling out loud. My hands are shaking. First, need a breath, which sounds odd but often breaks the freeze. Grounding works. Feel your feet on the floor, press a finger into your palm, sip cool water. Tiny actions are powerful. Open one window instead of cleaning the whole house. Set a 1-minute timer to open an email or say one sentence in a difficult conversation. Those tiny commitments create momentum without demanding a heroic effort. Longer term, first do rehearse little scripts and safety plans so a future shutdown meets a practiced response. Rehearse what you will say if you freeze. "Give me a moment" is a full sentence. Ask a trusted person to prompt you with a phrase if you go quiet. Build habits that return you to action. Short walks, regular sleep, and breaking tasks into bite-sized steps. Over time, the brain learns that small actions are safe, and the freeze loosens. It's like rebooting a frozen computer, only kinder and with fewer angry error messages. 5. How it ends. Endings usually take one of a few practical shapes: a return to everyday coping, a clear crisis that needs immediate help, a slow pattern of avoidance that becomes chronic, or a quieter shift toward acceptance and new ways of living. People differ, of course. First dissociate when stress spikes. First drift out of conversations and later realize hours passed, and sometimes that fades with rest. Other times, first do not just drift. First lose a shared sense of what is real, and that requires faster help. A sharp crisis can look like intense panic, persistent, hopeless thoughts, or losing touch with shared reality. Psychosis, which means seeing or hearing things others do not or holding beliefs that don't match common evidence, is one example. When that happens, safety planning and immediate support matter more than analysis. First call a trusted person. First use a crisis line, or first go to an emergency room. These steps ground me and create time to figure out what next. For instance, someone who starts hearing voices after a traumatic event often stabilizes when they get a medical check, short-term support, and a space to stop spinning. Many endings are gradual and practical: learning skills, getting therapy, using a medication when needed, and building routines. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps by changing how first think and what first do in simple steps. Dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, gives clear tools for intense emotions, breathing, grounding, and steps to stay safe. First practice grounding by naming 5 things first see, for first can touch, 3 first hear, 2 first smell, and 1 thing first can taste. Small, steady actions like this often turn chaos into manageable days. Friends, family, and a regular sleep-wake routine also help more than first expected. Not every ending is a tidy cure. Sometimes it's about folding the hard parts into a livable story. First do not need to pretend everything is solved. First learn to notice patterns early so first can change course before things break. In some cases, people live with ongoing symptoms, but lead meaningful lives by using supports and adjusting goals. Humor helps. Reality rarely hands out a user guide, and a little self-kindness goes a long way. Ultimately, the way it ends often depends on whether first reach for help, learn simple tools, and allow the next chapter to be different from the one that broke me. We looked at why the mind sometimes can't handle reality. It gets overwhelmed, it protects you by pulling away, it tells stories to make sense of chaos, or it freezes so you don't get hurt. Try swapping first M like this for first do. For example, first do pull away when things get messy, or first do replay the worry movie. That helps you spot patterns without blame. Remember, your brain isn't a villain. It's an overzealous bouncer trying to keep you safe, a bouncer who sometimes mistakes a whisper for a fight. If any of this helped you, you're not alone. Pay attention to these things first, and small changes will eventually lead to results. If this helped, leave a short comment about what you do when reality seems too overwhelming. Subscribe to the channel for calming and helpful videos, and share this with anyone who might need a friendly reminder. Next time, we'll discuss the dangers of perfect thinking. Take a slow breath in and out now. Allow the circumstances to soften. And remember, you can learn to face reality without becoming overwhelmed.